Hi, I'm Clinton, and this is my clinical data reconciliation engine, the mini implementation. uh, this project sticks to the documentation of solving the healthcare data problem related to having conflicting patient information coming from different sources or systems. So this is a full stack app that helps reconcile those conflicts and evaluate the data quality using an LLM, and in particular, OpenAI's. It's built with a FastAPI backend using Pydantic schemas for validation. Front end is just Vite, a React Vite, basic React app. Use Tailwind CSS for styling. And this is just raw Tailwind, no frameworks. So we have two endpoints as outlined in the docs. This is the user interface to interact with those two endpoints. We have the medication reconciliation, and then the data quality validation. And here we have, the form with, you can load in sample dummy data. You also could go in and edit that data if you wanted to kind of play around with, this little MVP that we've created. And I guess I can run, with this sample data, I could run a quick reconciliation here so we can look at the results. Obviously it's a very basic UI, but here's our results. This is, powered by, in this case, OpenAI's LLM. We're getting a confidence score. We're getting a safety passed, so if we could change values to obviously get a failed there. And yeah, for the AI, I just used OpenAI API. I have a little service wrapper. We could obviously swap that out for any LLM based on the needs of the project. Each endpoint has a task-specific prompt construction, and responses are returned as structured JSON. And then they're validated against Pydantic response models just to make sure we're getting, a valid response that's going to match our format. It's very lightweight, but I did use some in-memory cache with optional TTL to reduce API calls. Obviously, this is something that would need optimized in a production environment, but that's something that I'd be happy to walk through. And again, that helps us reduce calls to the LLM API and reduce costs. And just as a quick example, just on the UI side, we reconcile this one. We're just pulling that straight out of, in this case, local storage. Obviously, it could be a persistent database. That'd make more sense, but I really tried to keep this as concise as possible. I didn't want any scope creep. That's more an example of what's possible. As required, we have this API key, right? We're using an XAPI key header on the back end. That's kind of simulating sending that over. Obviously not practical from a production standpoint, but our routes are protected and they require that key. I do have pytest coverage for auth behavior, cache behavior, the service layer logic, with the LLM output. In this case, it'd be mocked. And what was the other test I have? Endpoint schema validation. As for the UX, the front end, again, you can load sample cases. We also have the data quality here. We could, obviously it's already loaded. We could evaluate this real quick as well, just to show that this is working. Here's our UI. We have completeness, accuracy, timeliness, clinical plausibility, and overall score. Here's our issues detected. We could clean this up, tighten it up, make it better. But overall, I think this is just a clean, basic way to interact with this API. Again, all this is populated when you click load sample record. Here's our caching, just as an example. Let me look at my notes here. What else do I want to say about the front end UI here? Yeah, so you could technically utilize this tool right now as is to submit reconciliation or data quality requests. You have some confidence indicators. it's pretty reliant on the LLM at this point. You could have a more optimized solution, you know, given a little more time. I did adjust the layout to try to make it a little more practical and visible on my laptop. But I wouldn't say it's perfectly optimized. You know, it is obviously a responsive design, but it's nothing special, you know, and again, could be optimized. A few trade-offs, maybe I'll touch on those. Let's see, you know, in-memory caching is probably the biggest compromise right now, I would say, with the system. I would also say that not using a front-end framework feels like a trade-off from my perspective, as far as just raw Tailwind might be problematic realistically if we were trying to scale a user interface or something. But for such a small little demo app, obviously not a problem. With more time, you know, we could obviously optimize our confidence scoring. Again, be storing, like, have a persistent database for our approvals and rejections, and obviously tie that to users potentially or something along those lines. The error handling's not optimal, I would say. You know, so here, if I make a request without the API key, I mean, I'm just getting a raw error message here, right? That it might be nice to make that a little more user friendly instead of feel kind of like developer oriented, I guess. But oops, you know, that's just a compromise that I made with such a short turnaround, I guess. Yeah, that's the app. That's the gist of it. Would be happy to dive into the source files. I have a mono repo on GitHub. Would be happy to go through it with you. Thanks for watching.